with Library of Dyslexia. We're going to be going over The Ethics of Belief by W.K. Clifford, part 2 today. It's a long one, so I broke it up into segments. Here we go. Section 2, The Weight of Authority. Are we then to become universal skeptics, doubting everything, afraid always to put one foot before the other until we have personally tested the firmness of the road? Are we to deprive ourselves of the help and guidance of that vast body of knowledge which is daily growing upon the world, because neither we nor any other person can possibly test 100th part of it by immediate experiment or observation, and because it would not be completely proved if we did? Shall we steal and tell lies because we have had no personal experience wide enough to justify the belief that it is wrong to do so? There is no practical danger that such consequences will ever follow from scrupulous care and self-control in the matter of belief. Those men who have most nearly done their duty in this respect have found that certain great principles, and these most fitted for the guidance of life, have stood out more and more clearly in proportion to the care and honesty with which they were tested, and have acquired in this way practical certainty. The beliefs about right and wrong which guide our actions in dealing with men and society, and the beliefs about physical nature which guide our actions in dealing with the animate and inanimate bodies, these never suffer from investigation. They can take care of themselves without being propped up by acts of faith, the clamor of paid advocates, or the suppression of contrary evidence. Moreover, there are many cases in which it is our duty to act upon probabilities, although the evidence is not such as to justify present belief, because it is precisely by such action and by observation of its fruit that evidence is got which may justify future belief, so that we have no reason to fear lest a habit of conscientious inquiry should paralyze the actions of our daily life. But because it is not enough to say it is wrong to believe on unworthy evidence without saying also what evidence is worthy, we shall now go on to inquire under what circumstances it is lawful to believe on the testimony of others, and then further we shall inquire more generally when and why we may believe that which goes beyond our own experience, or even beyond the experience of mankind. In what cases, then, let us ask in the first place, is the testimony of a man unworthy of belief? He may say that which is untrue either knowingly or unknowingly. In the first case, he is lying, and his moral character is to blame. In the second case, he is ignorant or mistaken, and it is only his knowledge or his judgment which is in fault. In order that we may have the right to accept his testimony as ground for believing what he says, we must have reasonable grounds for trusting his veracity, that he is really trying to speak the truth so far as he knows it, his knowledge, that he has had opportunity of knowing the truth about this matter, and his judgment, that he has made proper use of those opportunities in coming to the conclusion which he affirms. However plain and obvious these considerations may be, so that no man of ordinary intelligence reflecting upon this matter could fail to arrive at them, it is nevertheless true that a great many persons do habitually disregard them in weighing testimony. Of the two questions, equally important to the trustworthiness of a witness, is he dishonest, and may he be mistaken? The majority of mankind are perfectly satisfied if one can, with some show of probability, be answered in the negative. The excellent moral character of man is alleged as ground for accepting his statements about things which he cannot possibly have known. A Mohammedan, for example, will tell us that the character of his prophet was so noble and majestic that it commands the reverence even of those who do not believe in his mission. So admirable was his moral teaching, so wisely put together the great social machine which he created, that his precepts have not only been accepted by a great portion of humankind, but have actually been obeyed. His institutions have, on the other hand, rescued the Negro from savagery, and on the other hand, have taught civilization to the advancing West. And although the races which held the highest forms of his faith and most fully embodied his mind and thought have all been conquered and swept away by barbaric tribes, yet the history of their marvelous attainments remains as an imperishable glory to Islam. Are we to doubt the word of a man so great and so good? Can we suppose that this magnificent genius, this splendid moral hero, has lied to us about the most solemn and sacred matters? The testimony of Muhammad is clear, that there is but one God, and that he, Muhammad, is his prophet, that if we believe in him we shall enjoy everlasting felicity, but that if we do not we shall be damned. This testimony rests on the most awful of foundations, the revelation of heaven itself. For was he not visited by the angel Gabriel as he fasted and prayed in his desert cave, and allowed to enter into the blessed fields of paradise? Surely God is God, and Muhammad is the prophet of God. What should we answer to this Muslim? First, no doubt we should be tempted to take exception against his view of the character of the prophet and the uniformly beneficial influence of Islam. Before we could go with him altogether in these matters, it might seem that we should have to forget many terrible things of which we have heard or read. But if we choose to grant him all these assumptions for the sake of argument, because it is difficult for both the faithful and for infidels to discuss them fairly and without passion, still, we should have something to say which takes away the ground of his belief, and therefore shows that it is wrong to entertain it, namely this: the character of Muhammad is excellent evidence that he was honest and spoke the truth, so far as he knew it, but it is no evidence at all that he knew what the truth was. What means could he have of knowing that the form which appeared to him to be the angel Gabriel was not a hallucination, and that his apparent visit to paradise was not a dream? Grant that he himself was fully persuaded and honestly believed that he had the guidance of heaven and was the vehicle of supernatural revelation. How could he know that this strong conviction was not a mistake? Let us put ourselves in his place. We shall find that the more completely we endeavor to realize what passed through his mind, the more clearly we shall perceive that the prophet could have had no adequate ground for the belief in his own inspiration. It is most probable that he himself never doubted of the matter, or thought of asking the question, but we are in the position of those to whom the question has been asked and who are bound to answer it. It is known to medical observers that solitude and want of food are powerful means of producing delusion and of fostering a tendency to mental disease. Let us suppose then that I, like Muhammad, go into desert places to fast and pray. What things can happen to me which will give me the right to believe that I am divinely inspired? Suppose that I get information apparently from a celestial visitor, which upon being tested is found to be correct. I cannot be sure in the first place that the celestial visitor is not a figment of my own mind, and that the information did not come to me, unknown at the time to my consciousness, through some subtle channel of sense. But if my visitor were a real visitor, and for a long time gave me information which was found to be trustworthy, this would indeed be good ground for trusting him in the future as to such matters as fall within human powers of verification, but it would not be ground for trusting his testimony as to any other matters. For although his tested character would justify me in believing that he spoke the truth so far as he knew, yet the same question would present itself: what ground is there for supposing that he knows? Even if my supposed visitor had given me such information, subsequently verified by me, as proved him to have any means of knowledge about verifiable matters far exceeding my own, this would not justify me in believing what he said about matters that are not present capable of verification by man. It would be ground for interesting conjecture, and for the hope that, as the fruit of our patient inquiry, we might by and by attain such means of verification as should rightly turn conjecture into belief. For belief belongs to man, and to the guidance of human affairs. No belief is real unless it guides our actions, and those very actions supply a test of its truth. But it may be replied, the acceptance of Islam as a system is just that action which is prompted by belief in the mission of the Prophet, and which will serve for a test of its truth. Is it possible to believe that a system which has succeeded so well is really founded upon a delusion? Not only have individual saints found joy and peace in believing and verified those spiritual experiences which are promised to the faithful, but nations also have been raised from savagery or barbarism to a higher social state. Surely we are at liberty to say that the belief has been acted upon and that it has been verified. It requires, however, but little consideration to show that what has really been verified is not at all the supernatural character of the Prophet's mission, or the trustworthiness of his authority in matters which we ourselves cannot test, but only his practical wisdom in certain very mundane things. The fact that believers have found joy and peace in believing gives us the right to say that the doctrine is a comfortable doctrine and pleasant to the soul, but it does not give us the right to say that it is true. And the question which our conscience is always asking about that which we are tempted to believe is not, is it comfortable and pleasant, but is it true? That the Prophet preached certain doctrines and predicted that spiritual comfort would be found in them proves only his sympathy with human nature and his knowledge of it, but it does not prove his superhuman knowledge of theology. And if we admit for the sake of argument, for it seems that we cannot do more, that the progress made by Muslim nations in certain cases was really due to the system formed and sent forth into the world by Muhammad, we are not at liberty to conclude from this what he was inspired to declare the truth about things which we cannot verify. We are only at liberty to infer the excellence of his moral precepts, or by means which he devised for so working upon men as to get them obeyed, or of the social and political machinery which he set up. And it would require a great amount of careful examination into the history of those nations to determine which of these things had greater share in the result. So that here again it is the Prophet's knowledge of human nature and his sympathy with it that are verified, not his divine inspiration or his knowledge of theology. If there were only one prophet, indeed, it might well seem a difficult and even ungracious task to decide upon what points we would trust him and on what we would doubt his authority, seeing what help and furtherance all men have gained in all ages, from those who saw more clearly, who felt more strongly, and who sought the truth from a more single heart than their weaker brethren. But here there is not only one prophet, and while the consent of many upon that which, as men, they had real means of knowing and did know, has endured to the end, and has been honorably built into the great fabric of human knowledge, the diverse witness of some about that which they did not and could not know remains as a warning to us that to exaggerate the prophetic authority is to misuse it and to dishonor those who have sought only to help and further us after their power. It is hardly in human nature that a man should quite accurately gauge the limits of his own insight, but it is the duty of those who profit by his work to consider carefully where he may have been carried beyond it. If we must needs embalm his possible errors along with his solid achievements, and use this authority as an excuse for believing what he cannot have known, we make his goodness an occasion to sin. To consider only one other such witness, the followers of Buddha have at least as much right to appeal to the individual and social experience in support of the authority of the Eastern Savior. The special mark of his religion, it is said, that in which it has never been surpassed is the comfort and consolation which it gives the sick and sorrowful, the tender sympathy which it soothes and assuages all the natural griefs of men. And surely no triumph of social morality can be greater or nobler than that which has kept nearly half the human race from persecuting in the name of religion. If we are to trust the accounts of his early followers, he believed himself to have come upon the earth with a divine and cosmic mission to set rolling the wheel of the law. Being a prince, he emptied himself of his kingdom, and of his free will became acquainted with misery, that he might learn how to meet and subdue it. Could such a man speak falsely about solemn things? And as for his knowledge, was he not a man miraculous, with powers more than man's? He was born of woman without the help of man. He rose into the air and was transfigured before his kinsmen. At last he went up bodily into the heaven from the top of Adam's peak. Is not his word to be believed in when he testifies of heavenly things? If there were only he and no others with such claims. But there is Muhammad with his testimony. We cannot choose but listen to them both. The prophet tells us that there is one God and that we shall live forever in joy or misery according as we believe in the prophet or not. The Buddhist says that there is no God and that we shall be annihilated by and by if we are good enough. Both cannot be infallibly inspired. One or the other must have been the victim of a delusion and thought he knew that which he really did not know. Who shall dare to say which? And how can we justify ourselves in believing that the other was not also deluded? We are led then to these judgments following. The goodness and greatness of a man do not justify us in accepting a belief upon the warrant of his authority unless there are reasonable grounds for supposing that he knew the truth of what he was saying. And there can be no grounds for supposing that a man knows that which we, without ceasing to be men, could not be supposed to verify. If a chemist tells me, who am no chemist, that a certain substance can be made by putting together other substances in certain proportions and subjecting them to a known process, I am quite justified in believing this upon his authority unless I know anything against his character or judgment, for his professional training is one which tends to encourage veracity and the honest pursuit of truth and to produce a dislike of hasty conclusions and slovenly investigation. And I have reasonable ground for supposing that he knows the truth of what he is saying, for although I am no chemist, I can be made to understand so much of the methods and processes of the science as makes it conceivable to me that, without ceasing to be a man, I might verify the statement. I may never actually verify it, or even see any experiment which goes toward verifying it, but still I have quite reason enough to justify me in believing that the verification is within the reach of human appliances and powers, and in particular that it has been actually performed by my informant. His result, the belief which has been led by his inquiries, is valid not only for himself but for others. It is watched and tested by those who are working in the same ground and who know that no greater service can be rendered to science than the purification of accepted results from the errors which may have crept into them. It is in this way that the result becomes common property, a right object of belief, which is a social affair in the matter of public business. Thus it is to be observed that his authority is valid because there are those who question it and verify it, that it is precisely this process of examining and purifying that keeps alive among investigators the love of that which shall stand all possible tests, the sense of public responsibility as of those who work, if well done, shall remain as the enduring heritage of mankind.